Thought I would do a very quick recap of kind of what we covered last week. Now, this webinar is titled Smart Webinar Series, and SMART is an acronym. I don't know whether I stole it or made it up. I think I made it up because I didn't go searching for it, but there was something specific that I wanted to get or drill into regarding training. So the SMART stands for specific or specificity. Basically, every workout has a purpose. It's measurable. So there are ways that we can quantify your training, which we're going to talk about, or kind of already laid the foundation for it. Accurate is the A. So we can use this technology to make sure that, again, we're getting precise training. And I need to get to the R. Reliable. I always want to say realistic with our SMART goals, but reliable training that we can count on so that when you show up to the start line, you've done pretty much everything that you could have done correctly to get there. And T just stands for training, so that's why it's not SMART training. It's in there. Anywho, see if I go forward here. There we go. So last week we talked about two basic training principles. One was progressive overload, which I would say is the #1 most common mistake made by athletes, usually wanting to do too much too soon. We talked about creating a training plan, and a lot of times we think about creating a training plan working backwards. And I'll even say a lot of coaches do this. Let's work backwards from your goal all the way to where you currently are. The problem is sometimes that doesn't always align with the ramp rate that you can handle or the progressive load that you can handle. So sometimes you end up you should be starting up here. And unfortunately, if you, again, do too much too soon, it goes okay for a while before you kind of get derailed, hopefully not injured or burnt out, but I see that quite a bit. So I would say the best principle is to always start from where you are and build to what your body can handle. And if that ramp rate to the race, let's say, for example, you're doing Ironman is too much, then don't go all the way. And I guarantee you're still going to do better than doing too much too soon or for too long, even getting injured or burnt out or falling off than you would with a nice steady build to, again, whatever your body will allow you at your current fitness level. Then we looked at some of the charts in Training Peaks. Basically, the blue is your progressive overload. So this would be kind of the ramp rate. And then the pink lines are those training blocks that we talked about where you're going to work for some period of time before you rest and recover. And the magic really is in the recovery. If you neglect that, that's the time where your body is repairing, growing stronger, and that's when you get faster. And if you don't allow those periods of time, that's when you stagnate. You hit your plateau, you don't get any better. So that's really important to kind of modulate your training of periods of work with periods of rest. And that can look on, the macro cycles. And I didn't get too far into this, but, this is a whole year of my training in Training Peaks where on a macro cycle, I started, building at the start of the chart here. And then you can see there's a whole off-season rest period as well. Maybe I went a little too extreme on my rest this year, but it is always good to give your body that time, again, to just recoup, reset, and get ready for the next season of training. In smaller cycles, then we can talk about months, working for 3 or 4 weeks on, taking a little bit of a rest period. And then even weekly, how you structure your workouts, where I mentioned don't do more than 2 hard days in a row before you kind of bring it down and let the body recover. We always want this work, recovery. And the more you do that, the more work you're able to handle. And that's really what these charts tell you, is that it's not that you're getting any better on these blue lines as they go up. You're just able to handle more load. I also flipped over and looked at TriDot. I was talking about some of the advantages last week from basically the differences between Training Peaks and TriDot. And Training Peaks has really been the drive over the last 20 years. TriDot has come in and taken into account more inputs. So not just training stress as time and intensity, and that's really what populates these charts, but training stress on the body is different with different temperatures, elevations, durations, etc. So that's where we can get a little bit more specific in quantifying the stress on the body. So the other training principle we touched on quickly was just specificity. There's always a difficult balance for triathletes for swim, bike, and run. There were some questions about, where should I put my focus? And unfortunately, there's a lot of variables that, there we go, sorry. I was catching up on the chat, make sure I didn't miss anything else. Lots of different variables that come into play when deciding where to allocate your time. Again, if you're a beginner swimmer, really good to hit that as early as possible. And then as you get into the season, biking becomes a little more important, running becomes a little more important, and you can shift your focus as you go. I will talk a little bit more about frequency in the next couple of slides, a little bit later on about how many swims should you do a week to see progress at different levels, and kind of what should you be doing in the pool as well, which I'll also direct you back to my YouTube channel for some of that content later on if you're interested. We're going to dig into the specificity a little bit more tonight. So when we say every workout should have a purpose, the different intensities that you work at will elicit different physiological adaptations. And depending on what you're training for, you want to direct your training to best prepare you for that event that you're training for. So the cardiovascular system, the harder you work, the harder your cardiovascular system has to work, the higher your heart rate, your heart needs to pump, the stronger it needs to pump. Same with those breathing muscles. So working easy is great for sometimes, but really to get a big bang for your buck cardiovascular wise, you also need to work in the higher intensities, and just balancing that's the one of the keys. Your metabolic energy system, how you're producing energy. So again, working at the lower intensities, if you want to train your body to metabolize fat for energy more efficiently, for example, you're training for Ironmans or ultras, then you probably want to spend a little bit more time there than the sprint triathletes who want speed, who need to go fast because their race is much shorter. And those higher intensities will teach your body how to utilize those carbohydrates more effectively. Musculoskeletal system, again, you can train lots of different adaptations in your muscles, muscular endurance, your muscles' ability to contract over and over and over again. Again, for those long duration events, that's incredibly important, as opposed to, say, muscular strength or muscular power, which would be, again, more suited for going fast. And those different intensities, the more you do, or the specific balance that you're training, will have impact on how you develop in those areas. If you always go slow, trust me, you're going to be really good at going slow. If you want to go fast, you do need to go fast sometimes. And if you want to go for a long period of time, but faster, again, it's a nice blend that we're trying to put together. And then even being aware of the intensity, obviously, on the skeletal system, the harder you're going, the more stress you're putting on your bones as well. And they can only handle so much, so you need to keep that in balance. Neuromuscular system, the brain, body signals. I'm always very interested in how this works for people, especially in the pool. Some people have beautiful freestyle techniques, but then I ask them to do one simple thing differently. For example, catch-up drill. And it's just a slight timing change. It's actually quite big. If you haven't seen catch-up drill, it's where you let the recovering arm catch up all the way to the arm that's already up, and then you basically one arm at a time. So catch up. Some people just cannot do that, or it takes a number of lengths to figure it out. And all those different movements that we do in the pool with drills, actually on the bike with drills and on the run with drills, it teaches you different movement patterns. It improves your physical literacy, if you want to term it that, or your body awareness or your kinesthetic awareness. And if you can't make gross motor changes, there's no chance you're going to make very small motor changes, those fine motor movements when you get into real technical aspects of swimming. So really good to move differently. If all you're doing is swimming and biking and running the same way, you're missing a lot there. As well as, again, the different intensities will fire those signals faster or slower. Your nervous system will adapt and change those sheaths around those signals to make them go faster and have less, I'll say, distortion. The connection points to the muscles, the coordination, all of that happens with usually higher intensity work, which is why it's good to work in there. Your hormones are also incredibly important to keep tabs on. Obviously, training is beating down the body. Your hormones regulate all the systems internally. If you're a woman on a menstrual cycle, then that matters as well. There are going to be different times of the month that you're going to perform better than others, and that's also really important to keep an eye on. Digestive system, everything good in the body happens in the gut. And again, if you can train the gut for what it's going to experience on race day, like taking gels and sport drink and things like that, you're going to have a lot more success than just showing up and winging it. So that's also a big consideration. And then I'll say cognitive system, but really that sports psychology. How are you approaching training and racing? Are you positive? Are you negative? Do you have that positive self-talk, negative self-talk? Are you excited? Are you nervous? How to control all those emotions really can impact performance in not only racing, but training as well. I already talked a little the nervous system. I was thinking more of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system that we don't control, but it regulates our breathings and heart rates. And those are really good cues to pay attention to. Resting heart rate, for example, if it's elevated from what's normal, then that might show that you're a little bit tired. We also have the ability now with some of these smartwatches to measure HRV, that heart rate variability, which is basically the distance between the electrical pulses of the heart, and any differences in there can also indicate, whether you're stressed out at the moment and you should be training, or whether you should be taking a little bit of rest. So lots of different physiological aspects that either we can train or are impacted by training. And the more you become aware of that, the more effective you can be in training overall. So we're gonna start with swimming tonight. We talked about all of these training zones as well. So that was my point. So on these ones, so I don't have my notes up here. The different training zones, if you missed it, zone 1, super easy, zone 6, all out. And everything in between is everything in between. And again, different adaptations will happen at different intensity levels. And we're going to dig into these a little bit more in a second. And then we kind of wrapped it all up with, when in doubt, listen to the body. If you can marry some of the data with how you're feeling, then it brings context to everything, and you can make better decisions going forward. And then the softwares are kind of what ground everything. Where we're going to go to tonight is just how to get started in either Training Peaks or TriDot. I do recommend at the moment TriDot, just because of its sophistication, and it does a lot more for you, like create a personalized training plan based on where you're at. And I'm just going to show you how to put all those inputs, or at least lay the groundwork of putting all those inputs in. So if you decide to go that way, you are pretty much good to go to just follow the custom plan and do your training. So I already talked about, I should have just waited to this slide and I could have just read off the the acronyms. But again, we've got a bunch of different ability levels from brand new to veteran. So I did want to start with some basics, and then we'll progress a little bit. Before I go on, if anyone has any questions, feel free, jump out, throw it in the chat. But I will keep going since I'm not seeing anything. So in terms of swim training basics, actually, just a quick little poll here. How many of you would say you have one speed in the pool only? If you want to just raise your hand, hit your hand button. 2, 3. No one will know. 5, 6. All right. 7. Be honest. Probably one of the, okay, you can put your hands down. Probably one of the most common, some of you have worked with me quite a bit, and hopefully we've developed more than one speed. I would say if you have one speed, you can go slower. That means you're working as hard as you can pretty much all the time. So my 3 best swim tips, and this is just a random throw out here because I had some questions. Just give me some swim tips. I mentioned this last time. If you can, get in with a group, get in with a coach. It's great to watch YouTube videos. And again, I'm going to self-promote my little YouTube thing that I made for the Kelowna Tri Club, which kind of progresses through freestyle. But it's really hard to close the knowing doing gap without constant feedback. And I'll say also sometimes without that visual feedback. So if you ever have an opportunity for anyone to film you, take that up, because you may be very surprised in what you think you're doing and then what you're actually doing. Swimming is purely kinesthetic feedback, just how you feel you're moving through the water because you are limited. Where was I? Kinesthetic feedback. I was going to say my main point is swimming is like learning to dance in the dark. That would be my closest equivalent. You think you look good, but then you flip the lights on and you see the mirrors and you go, oh, okay. So if you can get that feedback, that would be my number one tip and suggestion to improve your swim. Swim easy. I don't know how many times I say this every day. You can use support equipment, and I'm going to go through what I would suggest you use, but sometimes to swim easier, especially if you're already a slow swimmer, throwing on a pull buoy or using fins to just assist in maintaining some sort of body position or being at the surface of the water. It's not cheating. It's using a tool to progress your swimming farther. Do drills. And I did get a question about some drills. And again, that's where I'm going to direct you back to kind of my YouTube freestyle progression, where there are pretty much our first, I don't know, 2 or 3 months of swim workouts and drills that I talk about the specific aspect of the stroke we're working on, and then show the workout that we're doing, and then talk about the drills that we're doing within it as well. So you feel free, you can take that, use that as much as you like, and hopefully you can execute somewhat well. But again, move differently. Like I said, if you can't do gross motor changes, you're not going to do the fine motor changes. So play with those as much as you can and let the speed find you. So don't try to force the speed. If you do that, I guarantee you, you're just muscling through the water, and you cannot overpower the water like biking and running. So the last quick little tip is feel and frequency over force and power. I always use this little bathtub analogy, and feel free if you want to experiment yourself. I'm sure everyone has at one point. But if you want to make the water hotter, you've been in there for a little while, you turn the faucet on and you want to mix up the water, you can, do one really hard push and just make a whole bunch of splashes and move your arms or hands through the water really quickly, or you can gradually accelerate the water. And once you've accelerated that water up to speed, it takes very little force to keep it moving because you have that momentum. That's the concept you're trying to apply to your body in the water as the thing being moving as opposed to the water. But once you have that velocity up, then it's about how quickly can you maintain it. So stroke rate, and don't judge my stroke, I'm just trying to stay in frame here. But a nice quick stroke rate, maybe a little less power, and you just maintain velocity, just like that water swirling in the bathtub. So if you think about that the next time you're in the pool, maybe that'll change your effort level where you're just moving your arm through the water, but it's not relating to the same movement of your torso forward, which is really the goal. So sometimes less is more, and that's my favorite one. And I do have I'll do a follow-up email just because the chat's not working properly. I was going to throw the link in there, but I'll follow up with the YouTube playlist, and you can watch all the videos. And I do apologize. I think one of them is me in the bathtub doing that same analogy. So one of my finer moments. And I will say for swimming, frequency and consistency matters. So that's always a question I get is how many times should I swim a week to see improvements? If you're a beginner to a week, you'll probably see some progress. If you've been swimming for a little while, then I would say 3 a week to see progress. Eventually, if you stagnate and you're not seeing anything, yeah, 3 a week. I'll be honest, if I'm not swimming 4 or 5 minimum, I'm not seeing too many results. So the more accomplished swimmer you become, the more that frequency goes up. And a lot of you don't have the bandwidth as you're trying to fit in everything in life and training with all 3 sports. But there may be times where you pick and choose that you're able to squeeze a little bit more in. But and you're always better off with shorter durations. So you'd be better doing 3 30-minute workouts than 1 hour-and-a-half workout, just because touching the water, because it's so technically orientated and feel orientated, you'll see much better progress if you keep the frequency up. Anytime you miss a week or 2, you're kind of starting back, not at square one, but some of you may feel like it if you've developed a better feel for the water. The better your feel gets, the less time it takes to feel like you lose it, where if you've ever listened to Michael Phelps, he can't miss a day or couldn't miss a day for that exact purpose. And if he missed 1 day, he had 2 to get back to where he felt good again. And I'll say many of the competitive swim world, that's kind of their reality. So very quickly, basic swimming equipment. Swimsuits obviously are important. I will just note that if you get 100% polyester suit, they're going to last for quite some time. Anything Lycra, they're going to get eaten up in the pool pretty quick. Goggles, as long as they fit your face, it's great. We got a little thing through the Kona Tri Club with Magic 5, so I always give them a plug. They're kind of neat because they have an app where you scan your face and they're supposed to fit it to it. For most people, I think it works. They are a little different fitting, so you kind of get used to it. But yeah, anything that fits your face is good. Anti-fog spray, I would say, is incredibly important. The worst thing you can do is rub the insides of your goggles. Don't ever do that. As soon as you do that, you rubbed off all the anti-fog, and anything future probably is not going to work very well. So if you cannot touch the inside of your goggles, what I like to do, if they're starting to fog up a little on me, take anti-fog spray. And again, better than the wipes. The wipes do the same thing. Give a spray in each goggle. Put them in your fancy Magic 5 case or put them in a case. Don't just throw your goggles in a bag either. They're going to get destroyed. And again, it sucks when you can't see, even worse in the water. So spray them at the end of your swim. Just let it sit. Again, if you have a little case, awesome. Little bags works fine too, but case would be better. And they'll be good for the next couple weeks, I find. So that'd be my swim goggle tip. Swim caps are great. Earplugs, if you have issues with water going in your ears, great. If you don't like to hear my feedback on the deck, that's also a great solution. I would avoid nose plugs just for the sake of it is important to be able to exhale through your mouth and nose. Obviously, you're not inhaling through your nose, but again, that exhale, that breath control, you'd be much farther ahead if you just figure it out than going nose plugs. Training fins, anything short, Speedo, Arena, Tier, or TYR, very short fin. You can Google any of that stuff. I'll put some links in there too if you're looking for any of that. Training fins, I would say, most important aspect or most important piece of equipment. They're really going to support the drill work that you're doing, especially if you have a weak kick. Swim snorkel also takes the breathing out of it, which if we're doing drills, that was also a huge help. Swim snorkel has, I'll say, a learning curve. So It might take you, some people get it right away, some people it takes a couple weeks. I would start just standing in the water, trying to breathe through it and not suck water up through your nose, because that's the difference between the mask and snorkel and the swim snorkel. Yet that nose is still open for business, and we don't want any water going up there. Hand paddles, I prefer flat over anything cupped, so I just throw that out there. And then, and I'd say hand paddles are the least important. Tempo trainers are also cool. They're little things that beep in your head and can help you with your stroke rate. But very few people kind of use those. And then we got kickboards and pull buoys. Usually the pools supply those. So you typically don't need to buy your own kickboard and pull buoy. Kickboard's what you kick on, or you can do different drills work with or support different drills. Pull buoy is that little floaty thing that you put in between your legs. Guys, that's your best friend, I know, and finally gets your ass end up at the surface. And sometimes, again, will allow you to play with different intensities as opposed to working all hard all the time. So other swim technology, you can get away with just the pace clock on the wall. There are clocks on the wall. You can time yourself. And really in swimming, we're judging everything as pace, which is time per distance. You can get a little more fancy and use your smartwatch. I will say if you're using a smartwatch, you have to press lap every time you leave and lap it out every time you come in, or it's going to count extra meters while you just stand there. At least most watches these days at the moment. Maybe they'll fix that. Also, if you're doing kick drills or anything weird that it doesn't pick up, usually most watches, Garmin's, whatnot, Wahoo's, they have like a drill function that you can just start a drill and stop it when you're done, and then just manually put in how far you went. And that would be the only way to use that accurately. Unless you're swimming continuously, nonstop, which again would be bad training most of the time, or open water. The watches obviously work a lot better because you're swimming continuously. There are goggles out there. Form's not the only one, but only one I thought of at the time. And I didn't want to do a whole lot of research on this, but that'd be the goggles with the heads-up display that will tell you pretty much what your watch will tell you, but you can see it as you're swimming. So you can get super techie in that respect. And they even have little palm force sensors now that you can buy. I haven't tested or played with those yet. I think there's diminishing gains in some of these technologies, but what do I know? We'll see. And then, of course, everything can be supported by the softwares that we're going to talk about in TriDot and in Training Peaks. So swimming, as I mentioned, is all pace. Again, distance for time. And whether you're swimming 25 meters or 50 meters, you could be swimming yards. These would adjust based on the distance, but again, pace is pace. So zone 1, this is where I wanted to get into a little more specifics about what all the zones mean in terms of how long can you work there and what does the interval structure kind of look like. And this applies for all 3 sports, really doing anything at an exertion level. So swim, bike, and run, this is all the same. So very quickly, zone 1, you can spend all day there. This is where you're warming up, or starting at least your warm up. This is where you're cooling down. This may be where you're doing recovery walks in between intervals or easy spins, or just floating on your back. So super easy. Really no interval structure for zone 1. It's just, those are typically the recovery intervals. So it could be whatever you like, or go all day. Zone 2, this is our aerobic or lower aerobic effort, where that's the system we're primarily stressing. You can do 4+ hours in zone 2. Typically, if you're racing half 70.3s or full distance Ironmans, this is where you're going to spend all day. And this is where you're going to be spending quite a bit of your time training as well. Again, no real structure. However, usually I do like to structure in some reset periods, because it really doesn't have that much of an effect. Actually, it doesn't have any effect on your aerobic training per se, but it can have a massive effect on injury prevention and your movement patterns. So my easiest example for this is every zone 2 run that I have, all my long runs, we're always doing some sort of work interval. It might be 9 minutes of easy running with 1 minute of walking, or 14 and 1, or 19 and 1. But we always take that 1 minute just to reset the posture, reset the form. Gives you a good opportunity to take in some fuel, hydrate, a gel, practice your nutrition plan. And again, just get going where you're feeling like you're running well again, as opposed to just slowly degrading to the point where you start maybe leaning sideways and your gait starts to shift. And that's where you tend to get into trouble with injuries. And again, taking a short little walk, it may lower the heart rate for a short period of time, but it's right back up again, as soon as you start running anyway. So that is what I recommend in terms of zone 2. You can also break up the workout a lot better that way too. Just mentally be like, okay, I only have 4 more 9-minute run and 1 minute walks to go. So zone 3 is typically 1 to 4 hours. This is where a lot of you will be racing your sprints, standards. Some faster athletes can do a 70.3 in zone 3. This is usually you're doing intervals 20 minutes upwards to an hour. Now, again, an hour might be definitely on the high end, but I say a 20, 30 minute tends to be where we're spending zone 3 intervals at. The work to rest ratio, which is the last one, you can, and this can fluctuate a little bit, but typically if you were to, do 20 minutes on, you'll take 2 minutes of recovery. So it's a 10 to 1, so 10 parts work, 1 part rest, and you'd be able to successfully complete the workout. And that's really what the ratio is how much rest do you need to be able to do another interval and successfully repeat it, which, eventually you're going to get to the point of fatigue and you can't. So there is a limit, but you should be able to do a number of zone 3 intervals, say like 2 or 3 20-minute on, 2-minute offs quite successfully, even if we went longer than that. So zone 4, now we're into that threshold. I talked about threshold a little bit. This is going to be 30 to 60 minutes in duration. So this is kind of our baseline that we're trying to set all our other zones for. But typically these intervals are somewhere between 5 to 20 minutes in duration. I prefer 5 personally. And the work to rest is going to be a 5 to 1. So if you do 5 minutes at threshold, 1 minute recovery is appropriate. If you're doing 10 minutes at threshold, then 2 minutes of recovery is appropriate. And again, you can repeat those probably beyond the 30 to 60 minutes with those rests, but any farther, it really depends now on your hydration and your fueling and your fitness, etc. But again, that's the general structure. And then zone 5 is VO2 max. So now we're really starting to push the effort. You can hold this effort for 6 to 8 minutes. Typically, these intervals are usually from 2 to 5 minutes in duration, and you need a 1 to 1 to repeat. So if you're doing 3 minutes of work, you're getting 3 minutes of the rest. And then the last one is zone 6, which is, again, your anaerobic capacity. As hard as you can go, you got about 1 minute to 2 minutes. Again, depending on the effort, you can cook yourself in 30 seconds if you really try, and maybe extend a little beyond 2 minutes if you're just into that zone. But generally, you're looking at 20 seconds to 2 minute intervals, and that's going to be a 1 to 5 to repeat successfully for a number of these. So if you're doing 30 seconds of work, you need 2.5 minutes of recovery. So a lot more on the recovery side of things. Now, this is how these softwares work in terms of once you've inputted your zones, then it would prescribe the workouts, giving you the appropriate interval structure and give you a holistic approach to training all those different systems based on what your goal is. This also comes into play, and I'll talk about it in the bike section because I had a question about the Cherry Hill or the Swamp Hill on the Cherry course and how to pace that. And understanding these systems can then also help you strategize how you're going to approach your racing. Because understanding how long you can stay in a particular system before your body starts to shut itself down, which is what we don't want, because obviously something bad is happening internally where your body goes, I would prefer to live, so we're going to chill out. And it will do that purposefully. No matter how hard you mentally want to push through it, it won't let you. It is the safety mechanism for your stubbornness. So again, understanding the durations, if you can hold 2 minutes at your anaerobic capacity, maybe going as hard as you can up the hill is a bad strategy. So where do you want to sit in for optimizing the speed across any particular course? But we're going to get there in a sec. Any questions? No hands raised. All right, I'm going to keep blasting through. We're going to get a little more complicated now. So how do you determine your swim zones? And I'll say the most widely accepted test is the CSS, or critical swim speed test. You could just swim a 1500, and we actually do that quite a bit in the club just to get that training stress and get used to swimming those longer distances because they're way more painful. Or you can do this wonderful shorter test, which gives you a similar result. Because really what we're trying to find is your steady state swim pace, and then we can plug in all the zones around it. So it's a little bit different than, say, we're close to threshold, but a little bit different in swimming. Actually, swimming, biking, and running all are a little bit different. Yeah, they're different sports. So To do this test, you do want to make sure you get a nice warm up in. I just copied the warm up from TriDot, but you do want to spend a little bit of time, starting easy, get the breathing in, maybe some drills, just get the feel of the water. I would also throw in some higher intensity efforts. They put in one build here where you start 200 swimming slow and gradually build up to kind of your threshold pace. I might even throw in some faster 50s and 25s just to make sure everything's firing. And then all you're doing is swimming a 400 meter. If somebody goes, well, I can't swim a 400 meter yet, that'd be a good start. Start there, getting up to that pace. If you're not there, then it's all good. Then you take a nice long recovery. You want to be fully recovered, and that can be anywhere from, usually I say 8 to 10 minutes, but this is 10 to 15 minutes, whatever, again, gives you a full recovery. And then you're going to swim a 200 for time. And the 200, this is the caveat behind it, the 200 does need to be faster than the 400. So hopefully you have recovered well enough that you can turn a 200 at a faster pace, or else the whole calculation doesn't work and falls apart. Make sure you count properly. That's really important. And time it properly. So again, either use the pace clock or use your watch or use your goggles, whatever technology you have. Again, you don't need anything. You can just swim, watch, start on the 60 on the top of the clock, and hopefully you can keep track of how long it took you. So just to give you some numbers here, to give you an example, typically the 400 meter is going to take, I'd say, a fast swimmer around 4 minutes, 20 seconds. This is a pretty elite high-level swimmer, all the way up to someone who's swimming like 3 minute per hundredths. You could be higher than that as well, up to 12 minutes. The 200, again, an elite swimmer is going to knock that off in just over 2 minutes. A slower swimmer, hopefully, if you're on a 3 minute per hundred, you can do it just a little bit quicker than that. So everything calculates out. So again, just for argument's sake, that's kind of our range. So when we look at our zones, this can change. So you're swimming this test ideally in zone 5, your VO2 max, where you can sustain that effort from 6 to 8 minutes. Now, if you're more upwards of 9, 10, 11, 12, then you may be swimming it more at your threshold intensity. So just something to be aware of. But you're trying to swim it as even split as possible. So same pace the whole time. And I will say, start slower than you think you should be. That first 50 or 100 meters was always the fastest, always feels good. And that's really because we're using those anaerobic pathways. The aerobic system hasn't fully kicked on to the effort. And as soon as that flips, the script flips and you go, oh, crap, I'm not going to survive this 400. So start easier than you think. You're probably still going quicker. And I would say all these test sets usually take a little bit of practice. So in terms of the 200 meter, obviously some swimmers can be in the anaerobic space or right at the top of that VO2 max for the test. Some people are going to be more in that VO2 end. Now, the calculation is basically take your 400 time, subtract your 200 time. So for example, if you swam 145s for the 400, you're going to come in at 7 minutes. And then you did for the 200 meters, so you're doing 320. So a little bit quicker. That's going to give you a result of 340, which is kind of right in between, a little bit slower, obviously, than your 200, because we're looking for steady state pace. So the idea of this is that the closer those times are, and this was going back to the question of how many of you have one speed, you're always working the same system, probably more in the aerobic side of things. So the energy systems really don't change as you go, or you maybe even get just more inefficient as you're trying to push harder and go for longer. So your steady state swim pace, if those times are close, so for example, you did a 7 minute and a 3:30, even though the 200 meter time is slower, your steady state pace is going to be faster because it's going to assume you don't have a fast pace. Your anaerobic system isn't contributing compared to some individuals who have a really high sprint capacity, have a big anaerobic engine. They can make that time difference substantial between the two distances, but that doesn't mean that their steady state long distance pace is as good because they're going to gas out. So it does take that into consideration. So even though I'm swimming the 400 in VO2 max, I guess that would make sense that I'm doing 145s. I drop down to 310s or what am I doing? 140s. I can't do my math. So 145s to 140s. My steady state kind of threshold-ish is going to be 150. So I muddled that one up for you. really just go time a 400, take a big rest, time a 200. You'll plug it into TriDot or plug it into a CSS calculator if you're using Training Peaks. And then you have your training zone to pop in, and then you just have to follow the workouts and it will tell you what to do. This was another example that I'm not going to butcher. It went the other way. So this is the example of 200 being a little higher or slower, but my overall steady state pace is actually faster. So I get that question all the time. Question, Brendan?
Yeah. What difference do you think the pool length makes for this, or do you have to test both?
Yeah, really depends on how good you're at turns. I find 50-meter pools for me is about 5 seconds slower, give or take, than 25. But I can get good distance in a pretty quick turn. Those rests add up as well off the walls. So generally, kind of most people, what I see is about 5 seconds, maybe 10, depending on, yeah, your swimming ability. So I would, sure, if you're going to do training in both, it might be good to test both, as much as that would suck. But I'm pretty sure you can swim some workouts and keep track of your time. Is that what you usually see, Brendan? You swim both?
Yeah, my long course times are a little slower.
Yeah, that's usually for most people. So just an example here of my training zones in TriDot. My result for the 400, my result for the 200. And when you subtract the 2 for time, I get a 305 for the 200. So I want to break that into a 100 pace. And I'm about a 132.30 as my CSS. So that kind of puts me, right in and around here, this zone 3. And then my workouts, basically, it'll say, swim this amount of distance in zone 2, and then this distance in zone 4. And I'm just using the clock to change my paces the best that I can. And again, sometimes it takes a little bit of practice. I say it definitely takes a little bit of practice. But that's pretty much in terms of changing swim intensities, how the softwares work in providing those workouts and feedback. Now, I can have the workout sent to my watch where I just press go on the workout and I just follow. Or I can print it off and just follow it myself. Or if you have those, again, fancy form goggles, then you can do the same thing and it'll just walk you through what to do. Moving on to cycling, because we don't have a whole lot of time. Probably going to have to circle back on the run today. Any questions on the swimming anymore? All right. I had a couple questions about indoor training and getting set up on that. But first of all, you have two options, really, indoor and outdoor. Obviously, this time of year, indoor training's all the rave, unless you're super brave out there and have some winter tires. Obviously, with some of the softwares these days, I would say indoor training is really taken off. I mentioned that I'm a big fan of Zwift just for the social side of things, the gamification, the mass of people using the platform. I think it's a little more engaging than some of the other platforms, but there are a lot out there. And Trainer Road's doing some really good job with their AI technology and their training plans. If you're looking for just structured workouts, Training Peaks is making a crack at kind of the virtual cycling world. If you're on Training Peaks, eventually it's going to be under Training Peaks Premium, which saves a little bit of money if you're using it. There are things like Ruvi that kind of more scenery, or full gas, where you can dial into Ironman courses and things like that. So lots of different options. But again, I'm a big fan of Zwift for the sake of what I already talked about. Indoor training, obviously, you don't have to get run over by cars, which is really nice. I do appreciate not having to worry about that anymore. I would say it's best for interval workouts. So anything of structure. I train indoors all year long. I know, I actually like it. Sometimes you can do interval structures outside on hill repeats or flat unobstructed roads. But again, if you're trying to be specific and not just go out for a ride, then indoors where it's at. You do have climate control, so you can control some of the variables for those inputs that affect your training stress. I would say it does have an increased need for cooling, so always make sure you have a fan that air sitting around you gets really warm. And hydration electrolytes really have to bump up. We're going to talk about this more in the future workouts about execution and getting off some of these topics, but things you can do to train better, have better results, and definitely hydration and electrolytes. I'd say electrolytes being one of the key things that are overlooked. KTC, I'm going to send a video out of how well you do with bottles on the swim deck. And indoor training requires less time. You can hop on the bike if it's set up. Like I have mine looking at it right here, set up next to me. You don't have to pump the tires, get all your gear ready, wash your bike after. God, your drivetrains, you got to keep those clean. So anyway, really in terms of time commitment. It's a good way if you're time crunched. Outdoor training obviously is better for longer rides, more stimulating. That being said, never do a structured long ride workout on Zwift. That's one of the benefits where you can join different groups or different rides or races, and that's kind of where I like the fun part. But outdoors, obviously, you need outdoor riding for your bike handling ability and overall speed. If you're neglecting that, you're going to leave a lot on race day because we don't race on our indoor trainer. Practicing race efforts and fueling, even just balancing and grabbing the water bottles if you're new, that's a big deal. So it's good to get out and have practice. Obviously, there are variable environmental conditions you always got to prepare for and adjust all your hydration and fueling and clothing and everything based on that. But and it usually takes a little bit more prep time. So pros and cons of both. In terms of bike equipment, again, very basic, proper fitting bike. Road versus TT bike, if you're a beginner, road bike is great. It's going to be less aggressive position, easier to handle, safer overall. You could throw some clip-on aero bars if you wanted, but probably not even worth it. If you're a little bit more serious, you've been riding a bike and are comfortable, then I would look at a triathlon bike or a TT bike. Triathlon bikes are going to be way faster, like a lot faster. So on every course, it's been proven. So it really depends on how competitive you are versus how much you're just there to enjoy it. Again, if you're more on the enjoyment side, go with a road bike. And if not, you want to race, then be prepared to be very uncomfortable on a triathlon bike. Helmet, again, you can go with vented or aero. Again, if you're not very competitive, a vented helmet, just a regular bike helmet, great, as long as it fits properly and it's not busted up. Helmets can't be crashed more than once. So if you've gone down, get a new helmet. Aero helmets are going to, again, be a lot faster, but in the summer, they're going to heat up really hot. So again, even racing, sometimes you got to be selective on what helmet you want to go with, or maybe your aero helmet's fancy and has vents that open and close, but that'd be consideration. Shoes, clipless, which are actually when the ones you clip in, I would say get there if you can. You're going to fall over, and you're going to fall over in an intersection at a traffic light with about 10 cars laughing at you. We've all done it. I've done it at least 6 times. So the reason that cycling shoes are a lot more effective is you have a stable sole. The power transfer is going right into the pedals as opposed to your shoe sole absorbing it through the rubber. So that'd be the big difference between clipless and flat pedals. And you can pedal smoothly through a circle, which is also for power production is incredibly important. Shorts, I would say, are the next really important thing. Some people like elastic bands. I like the bib shorts. They're the ones with the suspenders, so you don't have anything tight around your waist. But the key is the chamois. And for anyone new, no underwear, just the cycling short. That chamois does the padding and the moisture wicking for you to keep everything hopefully as comfortable down there as possible. Now, I will say indoor riding, sometimes I will go through 3 shorts in one ride just for comfort's sake. So because you're sweating a lot more, it's not, you don't have the wind cooling you down or drying you out. So anyway, that could be another consideration. Nothing worse than this good old saddle sores. And if you get saddle sores, there is cream for that. There is cream, chamois cream you can buy. Butt butter, one of my favorite brands just for the name. And good old Preparation H sometimes gets those saddle sores tightened right up for you. Jerseys, again, they're cycling and triathlon. The sleeve jerseys are a little faster now with the sleeves as opposed to the sleeveless for at least the tri thing. But again, moisture wicking, you got pockets for carrying your nutrition, etc. So I would say those are important. Gloves are nice to have, especially contact with the bars. You have a little bit of padding in there. And again, if it's cold, you can go full fingered. If it's not, you can do the cutoffs. Also really good when you crash. It's going to keep your hands from getting all sliced up. Glasses, I would say safety on the bike, especially when you're going fast for any bugs or debris, even wind, and good old bike light, or they have radar now and cameras. So make sure those cars see you and stay safe out there. Bike technology, I'm going to go just a little bit longer. If you're still good, I'm sorry. I knew I was going to go super long. But power through. If you got to jump off, thank you for jumping on. But I'll go for, I think, 10 more minutes. I'll get to the end of the bike, and then we'll save running for next week. So bike technology, bike computer, typical. Heart rate monitor. You don't need 5 or 4 bike computers, by the way. 1 will do. I also just sometimes use my watch. Actually, I've been doing that because I've been cheaped out on a bike computer for quite a long time. Heart rate monitor. Chest straps are best. So if you have a chest strap, great. You can get armbands now, measuring more the brachial pulse. The wrist for your watch is a terrible, terrible place to measure heart rate. Sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they're not. If you're really looking to use heart rate for your training, get a chest strap or get an armband. Ladies, if the chest strap bothers you because of your sport bra, the Garmin actually makes a sport bra specific heart rate underneath. Of course, it's more expensive, but there is a solution for it. But again, if you can get chest strap, always go chest strap. It's going to be the best place to get an accurate reading on your heart rate. Smartwatch I mentioned, again, you can measure everything on your bike off your watch. You just can't see it as well. So it takes a little bit of this, but again, still doable. You can still get all the data depending on what watch you have. And then power meter, they can be pedals, crank arms, chain rings in the wheel hub. Don't see many of those anymore. Most now are either on the pedals or the crank arms, some chain rings, but pedals, I would say, are the most versatile because you can change between bikes really easy, but they're most expensive. Crank arms are the cheapest, but they don't have that versatility. So, and really when we come down to bike training, power is king, heart rate's okay. And then again, if you have a platform to support all your workouts and in terms of logging and directing, then that'd be great. And then Zwift. So if you are looking to get set up on online, if again, I'm just going to show you Zwift. There was a question about how do I get set up online. Go to Zwift.com, just scroll down to how to ride on Zwift and go to their startup guide, and it'll just tell you step by step the equipment you need. Again, they have a bunch of different trainers. I have a Wahoo kicker, it's great. But there's a ton of them out there. We can go into more depth if you want to at a later time, but I'll direct you to there, and then there's all the steps to get going. So in terms of training zones for biking, again, heart rate's okay. Usually I like to use heart rate as a correlator to what power is doing. So power is the best. Again, the reason power is the best is power is power. Whatever it is at any given moment is what it is. Heart rate, it can lag and it can be impacted by a lot of variables like the 10 cups of coffee you drank before your workout, or how tired you are, or how hydrated you are, etc. So if you can get to the point of power, then awesome. Indoor training is great for that because all these smart wheel, and I should say, if you're going to invest in a trainer, get a wheel off direct drive where you put the bike, there's no wheel on the back. It will be way better and you'll regret if you cheap out. So those all have power meters in them now. So you can do all your power training indoors. If you don't have power meter on your bike outdoors, then those are great opportunities to enjoy your easy zone 2 rides or rides with friends, etc. So determining your bike zones, again, I'll finish up with this. If you get set up on Training Peaks or TriDot, it will want to know your FTP, which stands for functional threshold power. That's your threshold power, or we could say heart rate as well. And there's a couple ways that you can do this. What I recommend to people who are just starting is to do the ramp test. And to do the ramp test, all you're doing is you do a warm up, 5-10 minutes, and then you just start at 100 watts. And every minute you are just increasing by 20 watts. If you're on Zwift, it has a workout that'll walk you right through that. Actually, most training platforms will have a ramp test that you can just do, and you go until you can't. So it's to failure. Doesn't take long to failure. It's all good until it isn't. And this is probably one of the easiest ones to get right, because that's all you do is you go until you can't hold those wattage anymore. I would recommend, if you're new to indoor training, do it on erg mode, which means the trainer gets harder automatically for you on every step. So you don't have to do anything. You just have to keep turning the pedals. And when the pedals stop turning, you're done. And the calculation for this is basically it takes your average watts for the last minute before you failed, wherever that might have been, and it'll multiply it by 0.75, and that's your FTP. So that's the one I would start with if you haven't been doing much riding. The most accurate one, at least for FTP, is the 20-minute test. Again, nice long warm up. Make sure you got some harder efforts in there. You're all ready to go. And then you're just doing as hard as you can for 20 minutes. And the calculation is average watts for those 20 minutes times 0.95 or 95% of that, because we're trying to extrapolate out to a half hour to an hour max. So this one is a little harder to learn how to pace, and it's a lot more painful. But for accuracy's sake, this one's better because we can also capture heart rate FTP, or your threshold heart rate, which doesn't work for the ramp test. So again, example, if I did 310 watts, my 95%, I'm at 294.5 watts. So this would be a quick example of a 20-minute test. So this was the start of the test here. This was the warm up. So a nice ramp up, some higher intensities, some spin ups, etc. And then 20 minutes as even as you can. If you start too hard and die, test is no good. If you start too easy and ramp at the end substantially, test is no good. You want to get to the end wanting to push more, but can't. Now the difference on this one, no erg mode. So you can use erg all the way through the warm up if you like, if it's got structure to it. But as soon as you get to the 20 minutes, you just go in free ride. If you're doing it indoors, pick like a flat route, as flat as possible. Tempus fugit in Zwift, fugit, however you pronounce it. If you're outdoors, pick a hill that's nice and steady, or a road that has no disruptions, because you don't want to get stopped at a stop sign or traffic lights or anything like that. And this is why indoors is much better to do these types of tests on. So no erg mode for here. You're just freestyling it, keeping it as steady as you can for those 20 minutes. And that's why I say the ramp test is good to start with, because then it's going to give you an indication of what your FTP is. And then you can start there on this test. And you should be able to hold, maybe slightly build, maybe slightly die, but you're going to be a lot more accurate than just winging it for the first time. So again, this one you can collect heart rate data. This red line is my heart rate. You can see it's gradually increasing. This is typically happens due to heat. So usually around midway, we get a good indication. It doesn't move that much. It might be 2 or 3 beats per minute. And then we can basically say, okay, that's about our threshold heart rate at the moment. Again, even pace is key. Try to manage the cooling. So get some fans on you if you're riding indoors. And again, if you're not, pick that hill or unobstructed route. So if you are, again, going to get set up on either TriDot or Training Peaks, these will be the first steps that you do is put in your FTP values. So for swimming, it's the CSS test is what I would recommend starting with. The bike, I would start with the ramp test. And then you can be confident at least how it's prescribing workouts. And again, either software is basically just, when I create Training Peaks workouts, just like TriDot, it's just a percentage of your threshold that I'm prescribing for set durations based on my understanding of work to rest ratios, what's going to either have you be successful or not successful, and what are we specifically trying to achieve or stress in this particular workout. So that's the specificity again. So sorry for blowing 10 minutes over there. Running's the same kind of slides, but I'll quickly wrap that one up next time. Questions? Did a lot of talking. Brendan.
About calibrating power meters, like how often do you think that should be done? Like as the temperatures change, or is it kind of once a season?
Yeah.
Do you think it makes a difference?
They're usually, I mean, the trainers these days, even some of them, so there's trainers and power meters, I guess. And that would also bring me to another point. Usually the trainers now are quite good. Some of them even self-calibrate all the time. Some of them you have to do spin downs, and I would do them every couple of weeks or so just to check. Your power meters on your bike, same type of thing. What I do recommend is if you do have a power meter on your bike and a power meter trainer, I would run them both simultaneously and check the variance, because that can have a big impact. I didn't realize I had a 10% variance between my trainer and my pedals, and couldn't figure out why I wasn't pushing any power outdoors. And overcooking myself, trying to hit the power targets that I was doing indoors, but it was my meter. So that would be a tip. But yeah, I would calibrate every few weeks or so, especially if you're starting to see some discrepancies that don't make any sense.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions on any of that other stuff? Okay, well, the next one I will wrap up with running. That's basically going out and doing a 5K or a 10K as best you can, very similar to this 20-minute effort, and plugging in your results. So again, all of these would be the starting steps for setting your baselines in any of these softwares. And then you just got to trust the program and do the training and get the results. There might be a few more things to it. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for jumping out again or jumping on this Sunday. Jasmine, I'll wait for your typing here before I sign off. But, oh, you're welcome. Sorry to anyone who still has access to the chat. I'll figure that one out for the next one as well. So hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I will get the recording out in super speed if you want to catch any of it. I'll also send out that link to all those swim video progression that I put together if that's helpful at all to you. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.